Iran is feeling threatened. US President Donald Trump has stationed B-2 Spirit stealth bombers on a remote island in the Indian Ocean for one purpose. The US is preparing to bomb. Now, Iran is targeting a key US military base in what it calls a preemptive strike that it hopes will wipe it off the map. At least Iran says that's what it's doing. But the reality may be that Iran isn't even capable of reaching the far-flung island, never mind attacking it. It all started with a letter written by Trump. In that letter, Trump called for Iran to come to the table for direct negotiations over its growing nuclear program. For years, Iran has wanted to build a nuke that would allow it to project power over the Middle East, ensuring it becomes one of the most important voices in the region's geopolitics. It's not there, but Iran is getting closer. It's already enriching uranium up to 60% U-235, with most nukes requiring 90% U-235 to be operable. It's installing centrifuges and no longer cooperating with the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA, set up by the US, Russia, France, and the UK to monitor its activities. Iran is getting closer to a nuclear device, and Trump happy about it. However, you could argue that this is a problem of Trump's own making. During his first stint as US president, Trump removed the US from the JCPOA, preferring instead to target Iran with a massive number of sanctions designed to cripple its economy. Trump's plan is somewhat working on the economic front. However, with the US as the key power broker in the JCPOA, remember that Russia and, to an extent, China are allied to Iran, the entire deal is falling apart. Trump wants to make a new deal. Iran has refused. And now Trump is positioning US aerial bombers on an island named Diego Garcia as a threat. Iran has to come to the table, or there will be hell to pay. The problem for Trump is twofold. First, Iran has flat out refused to open direct negotiations with the United States. The country's president, Masoud Pezeshkian, said, "We responded to the US president's letter via Oman and rejected the option of direct talks, but we are open to indirect negotiations." That's not good enough for Trump. He wants his administration on the case, just as we're seeing with Ukraine and Russia, and he believes that indirect negotiations won't help him get what he wants. Hence the reason for the bombers on Diego Garcia. If they don't make a deal, there will be bombing, Trump told NBC on March 29th. But there's a chance that if they don't make a deal, that I will do secondary tariffs on them like I did 4 years ago. Threats abound, but nothing has happened yet outside of the repositioning of US bombers, which we'll return to in a moment. The second and far bigger problem for Trump is that Iran isn't taking these threats lying down. It's now threatening an attack against the very island that the US intends to use as a launching point for its B-2 bombers. And to make matters worse, it's not just the US Iran intends to hit. It's everybody who's cooperating with the United States. On March 29th, a senior Iranian military official spoke to the UK media outlet The Telegraph. He initially said that Iran was preparing a strike. There will be no distinction in targeting British or American forces if Iran is attacked from any base in the region or within the range of Iranian missiles. When the time comes, it won't matter whether you're an American, British, or Turkish soldier. You will be targeted if your base is used by Americans. That's a stark warning, with Iranian state media adding more. Iran possesses adequate weapons for such an attack from its mainland, such as newer versions of the Khorram Shah missile and the Shahid 136B kamikaze drone with a range of 4,000 kilometers, approximately 2,485 miles. And it gets worse for Trump. Initially, Iran threatened Diego Garcia with retaliatory strikes. Now the rhetoric is changing. On March 31st, The Telegraph reported on new comments by an Iranian military official warning that Iran may have no choice but to hit the island first. Top commanders are being urged to launch preemptive strikes on the island and its base if Trump's threats have become more serious, claimed the official, before adding that discussions about the island have intensified since the Americans deployed bombers there. The situation is heating up in the Middle East, and it's starting to feel like the US and its allies are creating a powder keg that could blow up right in their face. But let's backtrack for a moment. We've mentioned Diego Garcia several times at this point, which brings us to a pair of obvious questions. What is Diego Garcia, and why does Iran feel so threatened by it? Far from being an individual, as the name might suggest, Diego Garcia is the largest of several islands that make up the Chagos archipelago. It's sovereign territory that's currently controlled by the US, which built a military base on the island back in the 1970s. Since then, the base has been jointly operated by the UK and the US. The UK owns the land, and the US uses the base to project power and deploy attacks in the Middle East. It's also a proven commodity for the US military. During the War on Terror that erupted in the wake of the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks, the US used Diego Garcia as a base from which to send its bomber aircraft to Iraq and Afghanistan. That will immediately worry Iran. Iraq is the country's direct neighbor, so it knows that the US has proven that it can reach Iran with its bombers from the island. Right now, there are believed to be 4,000 active military personnel and civilian contractors on the island, with the US and UK contributing all of the soldiers. That alone wouldn't be enough to make Iran feel threatened. Sure, it's never great to have enemy soldiers stationed on a base that's fairly close by. However, those soldiers weren't preparing for an attack. Most would have been maintaining the base and completing their service before heading home. But that isn't the case. The US is changing how it uses Diego Garcia, and Iran is starting to feel threatened. Well, the B-2 Spirit bombers we mentioned earlier are starting to amass. The first reports of the bomber's arrival came from the War Zone, or TWZ, on March 25th. It tracked radio traffic from various locations to confirm that at least 3 B-2 bombers were en route to Diego Garcia in the wake of Trump's initial threats to bomb Iran into oblivion if it doesn't enter nuclear negotiations with the US. Alongside those bombers, the US also appears to have deployed at least 3 C-17 cargo planes and up to 10 aerial tankers to the island. Those tankers are important. They allow US aircraft to refuel while they're flying, ensuring that they have the range to reach any target and return to base safely, a target like Iran. By March 26th, the UK Defense Journal had an update on the Diego Garcia situation. Far from only positioning 3 B-2s on the island, the US has now moved at least 7 onto Diego Garcia, massively expanding its military presence on the British-owned base. This marks a further escalation in the ongoing preparations for large-scale military action, potentially targeting Houthi forces in Yemen and, as some analysts suggest, Iranian military infrastructure. The journal also provided more updates on the supporting aircraft arriving on Diego Garcia. The tankers were identified as KC-135, which were initially staged at important Pacific locations including Hawaii, Guam, and California. Now, those tankers are on Diego Garcia. No wonder Iran is feeling threatened to the point that it's considering a preemptive strike. After all, the B-2 is one of the most powerful aerial assets in the US Air Force's arsenal, a stealth bomber capable of dropping conventional and nuclear bombs. The B-2 entered service in 1999 and was used to strike Serbian targets during NATO's campaign against the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. Though the US initially produced 21 of these terrifying bombers, only 19 are believed to be in service today. That makes the transfer of 7 of these bombers to Diego Garcia one of the most remarkable US military buildups in recent memory. The US is dedicating well over a quarter of its B-2 force to threatening Iran. The aircraft itself has a 172-foot wingspan and measures 69 feet high and 17 feet long. It's powered by 4 General Electric Aviation F118GE100 turbofan engines, each capable of delivering 17,300 pounds of thrust. That gives the B-2 the ability to hit high subsonic speeds that are just shy of the speed of sound over a range of 6,900 miles. You can add a few extra thousand miles to that range thanks to the aerial tankers the US has installed on Diego Garcia. The aircraft also has a flight ceiling of 50,000 feet, which can put it out of the range of the majority of air defenses Iran could deploy against it. But perhaps the most worrying thing about the B-2, from an Iranian perspective, is its potential loadout. On the conventional side, the B-2 is a versatile aircraft. It can carry up to 80 Mark 62 sea mines, each weighing 500 pounds. Iran won't be worried about them. It's not gearing up for a naval fight against the US. Far more concerning is the B-2's ability to carry up to 80 Mark 82 bombs, which also weigh 500 pounds but are used to strike targets on land. Depending on the mission, the B-2 can also come loaded with GBU-38 JDAMs, GBU-31 JDAM, up to 16 Mark 84 bombs, which weigh a staggering 2,000 pounds each, and missiles including the AGM-154 JSOW and AGM-158 JASSM. There's also the nuclear aspect of the bomber for Iran to consider. The B-2 can carry and drop up to 16 B-61-7, B-61-12, or B-83 nuclear warheads. If the US wants to get really serious with its nuclear threat, it can also load up to 8 B-61-11 bombs onto the aircraft's rotary launchers. These bombs weigh 1,200 pounds and have a 400 kiloton yield, which is more than enough to devastate most Iranian cities. Iran doesn't want to see these terrifying stealth bombers in its sky. That's why it's preparing a preemptive strike against Diego Garcia. However, that brings us to another important question. Is Iran even capable of hitting the island? It's a difficult ask because Diego Garcia isn't stationed anywhere near Iran. It's nestled in the Indian Ocean, with TWZ noting that the island is some 2,538 miles away from Iran's southern border. That's not a problem for the US. Its B-2s can travel more than twice that distance and pretty much triple it with the help of aerial tankers. That ensures the B-2s can conduct bombing campaigns practically anywhere in Iran and still make it back to base without any issues. Iran's attacking options are a little more limited. In his statement to The Telegraph, the unnamed Iranian official suggested that Iran has missiles that can hit Diego Garcia, specifically mentioning the newest version of the Khorramshahr. However, it seems like the official may not have been wholly accurate in his description. He was likely talking about the Khorramshahr 4, which Iran unveiled in May 2023. The missile uses hypergolic fuel, which can be stored in tanks for several years, and contributes to the missile having a launch preparation time of just 12 minutes. So if Iran wanted to launch its preemptive strike using the missile today, it would have no problems doing so. The missile is also intelligent. Its airframe is made using strong composite materials that make it harder to shoot out of the skies. Plus, it uses a mid-phase navigation system for course correction rather than terminal guidance, making it difficult to interfere with the missile's trajectory using electronic warfare systems. There's just one problem for Iran. The Khorramshahr-4 only has a 1,242-mile range. If Iran is going to try and use it to deliver 3,306 pounds of devastation the missile is capable of delivering to Diego Garcia, it needs to increase that range by at least 1,000 miles, and is limited to launching the missiles from Iran's southern borders. That second limitation makes the Khorramshahr-4 an easy target for the US if it sends its bombers to Iran. As for other missiles, Iran doesn't really have many options. TWZ highlights that the Khorramshahr-4 has the longest range of any missile in Iran's arsenal. If it's going to have any chance of hitting Diego Garcia with a missile strike, it'll either need to deploy missiles via its navy, which is currently outside Iran's capabilities, or fire them from another country. Is any nation that's close enough to Diego Garcia to allow that to happen going to risk a full-blown war with the US? It seems unlikely. Still, the Iranian military official suggested another option, Shahid drone, specifically the Shahid 136B kamikaze drone. The official claims that the drone has a range of 2,485 miles, which is just enough for it to reach Diego Garcia if launched from Iran's southern border. The drone is also portable enough to be launched from ships, giving Iran the option of positioning its vessels in the Indian Ocean to stage its preemptive assault. Iran's issue here is that the drones may not have the attacking force they need to cause any serious damage to the B-2s being stationed on Diego Garcia. The Shahid 136B upgrade over the country's original Shahid 136s. However, those upgrades aren't extensive enough to substantially boost the original drone's speed, which is just 115 miles per hour. Not only can the Shahid 136B not sustain that top speed for the entire trip from Iran to Diego Garcia, but it wouldn't matter if it could. The drones are far slower than the B-2 and can't reach anywhere near the same service ceiling. If Iran were to use them, the US could counter by loading its B-2 bombers with anti-air missiles that can shoot the drones out of the skies. That's assuming the US doesn't simply rely on the air defenses it has likely installed on Diego Garcia to do the job. So drones may not be an option for Iran. The Shahid 136B can pack enough of an explosive punch to cause some serious damage to a B-2. Iran's problem is always going to be getting those drones close enough to cause that damage in the first place. So what about Iran's other option? Well, it has an air force, though it's far from spectacular. According to Global Firepower, or GFP, which ranks 145 military nations annually to discover which is the most powerful, Iran has the 20th best air force in the world based on asset volume. Among its 552 aircraft are 188 fighter jets, 21 attack types, and 10 special mission aircraft. The country also operates a tanker fleet with 6 aircraft, meaning Iran could mimic the US tactic of relying on what amounts to aerial refueling stations to ensure its aircraft could get to Diego Garcia, drop their bombs or fire their missiles, and then get back home. At least it could, were it not for one problem. Iran's air force is massively outdated. Take its fighter jets as an example. The current jewel in the Iranian aerial crown is the small stock of F-4 Phantom IIs it has in its arsenal. These jets were built in the US and debuted way back in 1958. Back then, the F-4 Phantom II was a monster. It broke 16 world records for altitude and speed between 1959 and 1962. However, an impressive jet from almost 70 years ago isn't going to do much against the US and its far superior air force. Plus, it's unlikely that the F-4 would even manage to make it to Diego Garcia. Granted, it has a range of 1,750 miles, which could be boosted by Iran's aerial tankers. However, it's not a stealth jet and will be easily detected by the US when it's en route, meaning it's liable to get blown out of the skies before it could do any damage. Iran's other aerial assets include the F-14 Tomcat, which was made famous in Top Gun and is at least a little more up-to-date than the F-4, and the F-5E Freedom Fighter. But again, both of those jets are American-made and a long way behind what the US is capable of deploying today. The US also understands these jets inside and out, meaning it can easily counter any threat they might pose. Beyond that, Iran can only field Soviet-era aircraft from Russia and similarly old fighter jets from China, such as the Chengdu J-7 F-7 fish can that was introduced in 1966. In short, an Iranian Air Force assault on Diego Garcia seems to be out of the question. And with the country's longest-ranged missile not being able to touch the island and its best drone only just managing to get there, Iran's only other option is its navy, and that isn't going to do much. GFP says Iran has the world's 34th strongest navy in terms of total assets, though its rank rises to 15th when taking tonnage into account. It has 107 vessels capable of displacing 223,395 tons of water. These vessels are typically frigates, such as the IRIN Jamaran guided missile frigate and the IRIN Alvand, none of which can really test the far more powerful ships the US has at its disposal. Iran also lacks any aircraft carriers, meaning it can't bring its stockpiles of outdated fighter jets and bombers close enough to Diego Garcia, to the point where they could do some damage. Granted, Iran has submarines. 25 of them, in fact, and they may have held the key to a successful preemptive strike against the US base. The problem is that most of these submarines are Kilo-class vessels, built by the Soviet Union in 1982. Not only are they diesel-powered, making them easier to detect underwater, but they're not equipped with missile systems Iran can use to attack land targets. The submarine can hit threats in the air thanks to being equipped with SAN-8 or SAN-10 surface-to-air missile systems. However, unless the US is flying its B-2 bombers in low formation, and Iran somehow identifies the stealth aircraft using its submarine's outdated radar systems, those missiles won't present much of a threat. That's the problem for Iran. It's talking a big game about launching a preemptive strike against Diego Garcia. However, unless it has some sort of hidden trick up its sleeve, the reality is that most of its weapons aren't up for the job. Iran's longest-distance missile can't reach the island base. Its best drone can, but it's slow-moving enough to be tracked and shot out of the skies before it ever reaches Diego Garcia. Plus, now that Iran has stated that a preemptive attack is possible, it's alerted the US to be on the defensive. That might mean that we see US destroyers and perhaps even aircraft carriers arriving at the base sooner or later. But what do you think about Iran's push for a preemptive strike on Diego Garcia? Is it even possible? And if it is, how do you think the US and the UK would respond? Share your thoughts in the comments, and remember to subscribe to The Military Show for more up-to-date commentary on the latest developments in the Middle East. Now go and check out Trump ready to bomb Iran into oblivion, or click this other video instead.